So yesterday we learned how to solve a system of equations graphically. Today we're going to learn how to solve a system of equations using a method we call elimination. So before we do that, take a second to try that do now. What's the difference between x plus 5 and negative parentheses x plus 5? So looking at the do now, the x plus 5 stays x plus 5, where the negative x plus 5 really tells us that there's an invisible negative 1 in front. And in order to get rid of the parentheses, we need to distribute that negative 1. So negative 1 times x gives me negative 1x, and negative 1 times 5 gives me a negative 5. So that actually turns into negative 1x minus 5. So in order to solve a system of equations using the elimination method, both equations must be in something that we call standard form. Now, standard form is ax plus by equals c. So this is different than slope-intercept form because the y is no longer alone. It's always the x, and then the y equals the constant. So that number is just by itself.
So let's look at an example together. So we need to make sure both equations are in standard form with x and y equals a number, xy equals a number, and we have that there. So now with the elimination method, our point is going to be to try to eliminate one of the variables. And the way that we want to do that is we need to make sure that the x or the y value both have the same coefficient or the same number in front. So if I look here, the x has a 2 in front and the x has a 2 in front. Then we also want to make sure their signs are opposite. So one's a negative and one's a positive. So that's awesome. That's exactly what we want for the elimination method. So then what we're going to do is we can add those equations together. Because negative 2x plus 2x cancels out and gives me 0. That eliminates the x. Then negative 8y and negative 6y give me negative 14y. 10 and 18 give me 28. Then we're just going to solve for our y here. And the negative 14 and the y are held together by an invisible multiplication symbol. So the opposite is to divide by negative 14. And what I do on one side, I need to do to the other. So I end up with y equals negative 2. Right, so we know with the system of equations, we need an ordered pair. So if we need an ordered pair, that means we need the x and the y. So I need to solve for my x value here. So we're going to do that just as we would check any sort of an equation. So we're going to pick one of the two equations. So here, let's just pick the first equation. Then I know y equals negative 2. So then what can I do in my new equation everywhere I see y? I'm going to replace it with that negative 2. Substitute in that negative 2. So this gives me negative 2x minus 8. Instead of y, it's going to be times negative 2 equals 10. So then I end up with negative 2x. Now, minus 8 times negative 2 gives me a positive 16 equals 10. Then we just need to solve for x. So in order to do that, I'm going to subtract 16 on both sides. And that leaves me with negative 2x equals negative 6. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. Then I get x equals 3. Then finally, I need to write my answer as my ordered pair, my x comma y. And my x is 3, my y is negative 2. And there's my solution to the system of equations.
So let's look at my next example. Remember, the first thing we want to make sure they're both in standard form with x, y equals a number. and they are. Then we need to check, are my x's the same here? Yeah, are they opposite signs? Yes, so we can just add the equations. So negative 2x and 2x will cancel. Negative 9y plus 3y gives me negative 6y. Negative 4 and negative 20 gives me negative 24. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6, and I get y equals 4. Now we need to solve for my x, so I'm going to pick one of the equations. So let's pick the second equation in this time. So I have 2x plus 3y equals negative 20. So now I know y equals 4. Everywhere I see y in the equation, I'm going to replace it with that 4. So I have 2x plus 3. Instead of times y here, it's going to be times 4 equals negative 20. So then I have 2x plus 3 times 4 is 12 equals negative 20. Then we need to solve for that x value. So I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides. And then I'm left with 2x equals negative 32. Then I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 16. Then I need to write my answer as an ordered pair. My x is negative 16, and my y is 4. So if we look at example 2, we need to make sure they're both in standard form. So I have x, y equals a number, x, y equals a number. Then, are my x's the same? No. Are my y's the same? Yeah, I have a 4 and a 4. One's positive and one's negative, so I can just add my equations together. Negative 4y and positive 4y will cancel out. I'm left with negative 5x and negative 1x, which gives me negative 6x, equals negative 15 minus 3 gives me negative 18. Then we need to solve for x. We divide both sides by negative 6, and I get x equals 3. Then we need to solve for y, so we're going to pick one of those equations. So I'm going to pick the first equation, negative 5x minus 4y equals negative 15. I know x equals 3, so everywhere in my equation, I'm going to replace my x with 3. So this becomes negative 5. Instead of times x, it's now times 3. Minus 4y equals negative 15. And then we're going to solve. So I get negative 15 minus 4y equals negative 15. Then I need to add 15 on both sides of my equation. So I get negative 4y equals 0. Divide both sides by negative 4, and I get y equals 0. Then we need to write our answer as an ordered pair. So my x is 3, and my y is 0. Take a minute, pause this video, and try examples 3 and 4. So here are the answers to examples 3 and 4. If you have any questions, please comment on the video below.
So now I want you to take a second and look at example 5. How does example 5 differ from the previous examples? So they're both in standard form, and when you look, are the x's the same? Yeah, but are they different signs? No. So since they're not different signs, what we're going to have to do is we need to make them different signs. What can I multiply a 7 by to get it to become a negative 7? That would be a negative 1. So we're going to need to multiply that whole equation by negative 1. And when I say that whole equation, I mean you need to distribute that. So negative 1 times 7x gives me a negative 7x. Negative 1 times 8y gives me a negative 8y. And negative 1 times 20 gives me a negative 20. Now, these are different signs, so what we're going to have to do is we need to add these equations together. 7x and negative 7x will cancel out. Negative 1y and negative 8y give me negative 9y. And 29 and negative 20 gives me 9. Then we need to divide both of our equations by negative 9, and I get y equals negative 1. Then we need to determine what my x value would be. So we're going to take one of our equations. So let's take the first equation here. And everywhere I see y, I'm going to replace it with -1. So this becomes 7x plus 8. Instead of times y, it's times -1 equals 20. So then we have 7x. 8 times -1 is a -8 equals 20. Then we need to just solve this two-step equation. We add 8 on both sides. I get 7x equals 28. Divide by 7 on both sides, and x equals 4. So we need to put our answer as a ordered pair, and we get 4, -1.
Now let's look at example 6. So we notice we have them both in standard form, but here I have a -4 and a -4 as my x. So in order to make one of these a +4, I need to multiply by a -1. So I need to distribute this out. So -4 times -4 gives me a 4x. -1 times y gives me a -1y. -1 times 9 gives me a -9. Now that both of these are 4 with opposite signs, I can add the equations. So -4x and 4x will cancel. 8y and -9y and -1y give me 8y. And 17 minus 9 gives me 8. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8 to solve for y, and I get y equals 1. So then we're going to take one of our equations. So I have -4x plus y equals 9. And I need to solve for my x here. So everywhere I see y, I'm going to replace it with a 1. So this is -4x. Instead of plus y, it's plus 1 equals 9. Then we need to just solve that two-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. So I get -4x equals 8. Divide by -4. And I get x equals -2. So then we need to put our answer as a ordered pair, and it's -2, 1. Pause this video and try examples 7 and 8. So here are the answers to examples 7 and 8. If you have any questions, please make sure you comment below. So here I have some mixed practice for you to complete. Please complete these questions and then put the answers onto the Google form. This will be counted as a classwork grade. So there's a Google form provided on the e-board for you, and complete these 4 questions as a classwork grade. If you have any questions, please comment below.